Hi, I'm Chris Douridas, and boy, welcome to KCRW's Behind the Screens. This is KCRW's virtual event series where we talk with today's most fascinating storytellers and creators. And today we welcome David Dinerstein, Joseph Patel, and Robert Fivolent, producers of the insanely good new feature documentary, Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, from first-time director and longtime music lover, Questlove. The film is from Searchlight Pictures. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Chris.
Thank you.
The great thing about this Zoom gathering, I'm a radio host. Some people on this know this. Normally on the radio, I don't have to describe music. I can just play it. I can just press play. But usually when I'm talking about a movie, if I'm talking about it on the radio, I can't play the movie for you. But in this particular forum, in this particular moment, and with this particular film, everyone joining us for this conversation just saw the movie and heard the music. And what a movie. Oh my God. I mean, revelatory, says The Guardian. An incredible, vital act of restoration and reclamation, says Rolling Stone. And spectacular. I was moved to tears by the beauty of it all, says Chris Douridas of KCRW. Just congratulations on getting this far with this thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
So I want to start with Robert, because Robert, I work in music every day. I wake up looking for the greatest, music from past, present, future. And I've never heard about this epic event until I saw the movie. In fact, I went into this movie not knowing anything about the movie. I just went in, I got a link and I started watching the movie. And I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. And I was floored by what I saw. And it was upsetting because it had taken so long to come to, for me to be aware of it. But I was so grateful that it finally had come to pass. And I believe it started with you, Robert, right?
I have spent most of my career as an entertainment lawyer. And I was working at the time for an independent film company that was responsible for some amazing movies. We made Memento and Whale Rider and Donnie Darko and Monster, a lot of indie films. And it was a small company, and sort of in the course of my work there, I was always sort of keeping an eye out for acquisitions and things. And I had a friend from college who told me about that he had heard about this footage. And, I'm a huge music fan, and I was, determined to find out more about it, and ultimately developed a relationship with Hal Tolchin, who had originally shot the footage, and went and met with him in Bronxville, New York, and spent some time with him. And, he showed me the footage, and was blown away by it, and that sort of started the journey.
So wait, a friend from college said, "Hey, I know about this footage." That in itself is like, why was he waiting so long to tell you this?
Well, that's maybe a longer story, but he was also somebody interested in music and film production, and he was doing some research, and he just started describing this footage, and I said, "Well, I don't know what you're working on, but that's what I'm interested in finding out about." So, he told me what he knew, and I sort of worked on it from there. And again, that sort of launched this. And, it was almost 12 years ago, I think, that happened. So this hasn't been an overnight success from any standpoint.
So the remarkable thing, there's so many remarkable things about this movie and this footage that existed that hadn't seen the light of day in 50 years, sitting in a basement for 50 years, a multi-camera shoot that's so perfectly recorded. One would think that it would have been deteriorated in some form or fashion. Was it being refrigerated? How did this footage remain in such good quality over all this time? What kind of basement was it sitting in?
Well, I don't want to be the sole person for this interview, but I'll let Joseph jump in. But when I met Hal, he had it in the basement of his house, and he had run a TV and production facility in New York. So he was not unaware of the materials or how to take care of them. But we eventually, moved the footage into storage and then into a restoration process. And, I think Joseph can talk more about the restoration for sure. So.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that because this story hadn't been told for so long, those tapes didn't really move, right? So they were in good condition, relatively good condition. There were some tapes that had mold on them that we had to bake away, which is, for people who don't know, that's a 2-week long process that is just a little bit of heat for over the course of 2 weeks to bake away the mold. And then we had to get the footage digitized, and there were about 45 or 50 reels that needed to be digitized. And one of the things, things that they probably didn't think about in 1969, but the 2-inch videotape was housed in these 15-inch diameter Tiffany blue hard plastic cases. On the inside of the cases was a sticker that was supposed to where you put the information of what's on the reel. But over the course of time, the glue from those stickers sort of seeped onto the tape. But because the tapes hadn't really been moved at all, that was easily removable. So yeah, there is a little bit of an irony in the fact that because the story hadn't been told, the actual source material was in good condition.
I would also just add that Hal was sort of a maverick during that time. He was chastised by people in the industry for deciding to capture this concert on 2-inch videotape. He was well ahead of his time, but thankfully he did, because it really held up incredibly well compared to 16 millimeter film, which would have been used as an alternative, for instance.
So let's talk about the fact that it was 45 hours of footage, and you guys came across this treasure trove of material. Can one of you speak to when either of you first laid eyes on actual footage and heard some of the recordings? That must have been.
I mean, literally from my first meeting with Hal, I started watching, what he had, and, he had some materials that had been dubbed, so that they could be viewed. And, he started talking to me about incredible moments that were in other places of the footage that he didn't have available for me to see, like Mahalia singing with Mavis Staples. And I'm like, just when can I get a hold of this to go home and find that moment, but
I watched that scene 4 times.
Wow.
I kept backing it up and bringing other people into the room and saying, watch this woman. Because seeing Mahalia Jackson up close with that power in that moment, with that tee up from Jesse Jackson and Mavis, I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about it now. That was one of the tearful moments for me, because a human voice delivering such beauty can force tears forward and emotion forward in a way like nothing else. I mean, I was astounded. I'd never seen her. I've seen footage of her, but I'd never seen it shot so well.
And imagine if she actually felt well that day. In the film, it describes, her not feeling well, which is why she called Mavis up on stage to help her out with the song. It was an extraordinary moment.
If there's not enough parallels in the movie to modern times, there's one other that I don't think the movie discusses, which is that the Hong Kong flu was apparently circulating around the country at the time. And apparently, there were people at Woodstock and even at this festival that may have had that flu. So,
wow. So, okay. So you feel very confident that the footage is intact and the recordings are intact and it's everything that you hoped it would be. Now you got to find somebody to fashion this into a movie. And so the steps from acquiring the rights to the material to bringing on somebody to comb through and give it the heart that Questlove gave it. How did that come to pass? How did Questlove come to be involved?
I mean, I'll just start on that note. We had a lot of interest from, some incredible filmmakers who would have loved to have shepherded this story onto screen. But we felt it was critical to find a director who understood the music and its history and the context of what it all meant. And, someone who could put the footage and its relevance into context completely. And Ahmir embodied all of those types of things. And despite Ahmir not ever having directed a film before, we knew he was an incredible storyteller. And when we showed him a glimpse of the footage, he was just completely blown away and surprised that he didn't know anything about this, like all of us. And, this is sort of a common thing for almost everyone. And we've all worked with first-time directors in the past. And I think we were just extremely confident that Ahmir, if he was up to the task, would do an amazing job. And we're thrilled that he decided to take this on. And ultimately, we're so proud of the film he created.
I read an interview with him about the movie, and he was saying that when he was 12 years old, it was Michael Jackson's Thriller that defined his life. And when he was 6 years old, it was Saturday Night Fever was, the big thing. And that helped define his life, at that point in his life. What would this footage or this movie or knowing about this experience have done to a young Ahmir, when he was coming up, seeing Stevie Wonder, 19 years old, doing a drum solo, this insane drum solo that I was watching this going, how does he do this? I didn't know Stevie was a monster drummer, first of all. But, Ahmir is a drummer. He's a drummer for the Roots, so I love that perspective from Questlove, from Ahmir, from saying that it's hard to know what seeing Stevie Wonder at 19 years old take hold of the drums like that would have done to inspire him as a young boy, and we all missed out on that potential cultural impact that this, not just that moment, but all these moments in this movie. And I'm sure there's others that didn't make it into the cut.
It's interesting because I think that's the impetus for Ahmir wanting to do this film is that I think, the way he describes it is there was like an anger that he had that something like this could happen and not have been seen or even known about, right? Like even when this happened, newspapers didn't cover it really. There was no review written up about the festival after it happened.
And it's not like it was a time when we weren't calling attention to great festivals. Come on, Woodstock.
Exactly.
Right. As the film eloquently points out, was, celebrated and heralded, and it was a 3-day event, and it was the same summer, and it was 100 miles away, and the only thing different,
Yeah, and I think that's why he got involved. I think that's why we all got involved to some extent, is the chance to, if we did this correctly, the chance to redefine what 1969 meant to America through the lens of music, right? You will never be able to talk about the summer of '69 again without talking about the Harlem Cultural Festival. And
absolutely.
I think that's something that we all feel very proud of.
I mean, I was, let's see, how old was I in '69? I was 6. I was 6 in the summer of '69. And I remember every household, we go to my friend's house, my parents' friends, everybody had the Woodstock album. Everybody had that album. It was ubiquitous. It was like, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right.
It's one of those albums that everybody has. West Side Story.
Or Hair.
Hair. Exactly. Hair. Which does come up in the movie. That story from Fifth Dimension talking about Aquarius and how Aquarius let the sunshine. I didn't know that story. That was
all based off a lost wallet.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Incredible story. So I agree. I think it's criminal that it hadn't been seen, but it's exhilarating now that it has finally been seen. We called out the moment with Stevie Wonder, the drum solo, Mahalia Jackson. That footage is absolutely epic. B.B. King looks so young. Fifth Dimension, as we mentioned, Sly and the Family Stone. That's interesting about Sly because Sly was the one act on the stage in this movie that was also on the Woodstock stage.
Not only was he on the Woodstock stage, he played the exact same set. So it's really interesting to, I wish I was at both of those shows to contextualize and see how they might have differed to some extent. But I think as you see Sly, he for some in the audience was, the band was somewhat of an alien, right? It was a well before its time. There were women in his band. There were white people in his band. It was unlike most of the other bands, that was performing during the Harlem Cultural Festival. And, I think as one of our interviewees states, he was a suit and tie guy before Sly, and after Sly, forget it. He was, he was just going. Sly changed a lot of people.
I think there's a theory that I think is pretty credible, which is that the Harlem Cultural Festival may have been his warm up for Woodstock, because he wasn't originally on the bill, and the set is the same. And unlike Woodstock, we have very good, clear footage of the performance. So,
I enjoyed the fact that somebody called out Sly in the movie when they said, "Well, you don't know if he's going to show up. You don't know when he's going to show up. You don't know if he's going to show up," or some words to that effect. Yeah. I didn't know that was always a thing with Sly. I thought that was a more recent thing with Sly. And I wondered, did you guys try to interview him for the movie and he just didn't show up? What happened with that?
No, we contemplated it, but there was, we finished this production during COVID, and there just wasn't the ability to work it in. And,
yeah, we hope he gets to see the movie, and it would be phenomenal.
You know that his daughter is now a radio host at KCRW, and she's co-hosting Morning Becomes Eclectic, Novena Carmel.
We love Novena. She's been fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. So was she helpful during the process of the movie making in any way?
To that extent, we certainly talked to her about her father, and she was very helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure, it's amazing how much she looks like him, yeah. Nina Simone. My heart stopped when she walked on stage. I was like, holy cow, they got Nina Simone too. I didn't know she was coming. One by one, it's a surprise if you don't peek at who's in the movie beforehand, which I didn't do. And so every time somebody was announced, I was like, okay, who's it going to be now? And it just kept building and building and building. And when Nina came on, I was just like,
I know I'm biased, but I honestly think it's the best footage I've ever seen of Nina Simone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true for a lot of the people in the movie,
Well, I think there's a couple of things about Nina. When she recites the David Nelson poem from The Last Poets, that's just an incredible moment in the movie. And there's beauty and anger, and she's just ruling this audience at that point in time. And her musicianship when she decides to play Young, Gifted, and Black for, I think, the first time was sort of extraordinary. As well.
We think that it was maybe the first time she publicly played To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. And I want to highlight one thing about that performance is in her band leader at the time is Weldon Irvine, who as a hip hop kid, Weldon Irvine to me is like a very strong sample source, and to Ahmir as well. And one of the things I really respect about Ahmir, having gone through this process with him as a storyteller and as a filmmaker, is it very well could have been a movie just filled with all those little nerdy connections. Right? This drummer used to play with that bassist over here, and they used to have a band. They used to do this. Some of the stuff that he does in his DJ sets. But, what I really respect about him is that he left some of that on the floor in service for the larger story, right? And to highlight not just what the musicians were doing that was incredible on stage, but sort of what it meant to people off stage and how that interplay happens. And I think that's the thing that, at least for me, gives me a lot of respect for him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I would add that, we didn't talk about this, but the performances of Max Roach and Abby Lincoln exemplifies that.
I'd never seen footage of them together performing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're playing a John Coltrane song together, and they were the king and queen of that particular time. And they were activists, and they really cared about social justice. And I think that really came through in the film as well. And I think that was an important component for Ahmir to portray that and make sure that everyone had their due, from Max and Abby to Hugh Masekela. Artists that may not necessarily be as big of household names as some of the marquee artists, but on their own are just, again, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's super eclectic too, with Olatunji and Mongo Santa Maria, and as you said, Hugh Masekela. I thought that was an interesting point too, where they're talking about how people were embracing the the Africanness, and Hugh kind of was emblematic of that. And yeah, absolutely stunning. There's a reference in the movie's called Summer of Soul, but there's a second title in a way, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised, reference to the Gil Scott-Heron, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Wondering about the conversations that went into the titling of the film.
I mean, I'll jump in. I mean, the working title of the film originally was Black Woodstock.
When it was trying to be sold, right?
Yeah. Actually,
well, I got it wrong. You're right, Robert.
No, there was a point at which Hal was marketing, was telling people it was the Black Woodstock. But when I started putting it together, I was calling it Summer of Soul. And I think during the production, Ahmir went back to Black Woodstock, and we all kind of were okay with that title. But as we continued to work on it, we felt, and I think Joseph, who had more intimate conversations with Ahmir, can speak to this, but we felt that this was something that deserved to not be compared to another event, that this is its own event. And we went back to Summer of Soul, and Ahmir, in his genius way, came up with the subtitle, the Gil Scott-Heron reference, which we instantly all loved, and sort of become a part of it. So
yeah, I think that when we were speaking to people who we interviewed for the film, people who were at the festival and people who lived in Harlem in 1969, it was obvious that they cherished this event, even if it wasn't recognized by everybody else. They really cherished attending it and their memories of it. And what
oh my God, the audience moments, the glimpses of the audience were the best part of the movie in so many ways, because we're seeing the joy and exhilaration in their eyes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And they told us that, while we were talking with these attendees, is that don't call it Black Woodstock, like it's its own thing, right? Like what Robert said, and that really resonated with us. And I think that when we went back to Summer of Soul, Ahmir likes the subtitles because hip hop songs and Spike Lee films, and it just his little thumbprint on it, which I thought was very, very perfect.
Very cool. Take us through the sort of postscript thing at the very end with Stevie Wonder. I mean, it's long after the credits and a million film logos. But yeah, can you take us through that? Because if you're, people might have missed what was going on. Tell us what was going on.
Let's just say it's a little Easter egg at the end of the film. I don't think we should explain it, but it is a little Easter egg at the end of the film. Everyone who watches this film should stay through the credits.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to, miss it. And somebody like me will go, what'd you think of that last bit?
Good reason to go back and see it a second time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stevie is he's a joker.
He's a joker. So what I do music supervision. I work on films. Before we close, I wanted to just ask, like, the clearances. God bless Randall Poster, who's your music supervisor, because the rights to clear something like this, I don't think most people watching movies have an appreciation for how many songs, how many different licensees there were, You know, Robert, you're a lawyer. I mean,
I was going to say, you know, when I talk about the fact that this film took 12 years, let's just say that's a part of it.
I would guess that would be the case, because a lot of people looking at this footage and looking at the list of artists and the various license parties that would be involved might say, oh, you'll never get this cleared. You'll never get to make this movie.
I heard it many times.
It'll take 12 years.
Well, I think the beauty is it was made. We premiered it at the Sundance Film Festival during a pandemic. We were lucky enough to win the grand jury prize, and the hope is that audiences not only across America but throughout the world can now experience this particular festival in its glory, and the hope that the Harlem Cultural Festival, as Joseph said, will now be part of the vernacular when you think about 1969 and other big events during that time.
Okay, so it's coming July 2nd through Hulu. People can watch it on Hulu. Is it going to be released theatrically? Can people see it?
Yes, I mean it's going to open up on July 2 in theaters across America, and it will simultaneously be available on Hulu. So the viewer can watch it in the comfort of their own home, or they can have a communal experience if they're ready to get back into the theaters, like myself. But I can't wait to see it at El Capitan, where it's going to premiere in LA, and obviously in the New York area. It's playing in theaters from Harlem to Times Square to the Village to Brooklyn, to the Bronx, all over the place. It's going to be phenomenal.
And just because I think people might find this a little hard to believe, none of us sitting here have seen this movie in a theater with an audience.
Yet.
Okay, how about the album? There's going to be an album.
It's
soundtrack.
Of course there will be, but we've just been
It'll take another 12 years.
Yeah. Hopefully not 12 years, but it's in the works.
There's only so much time in the day to accomplish everything, and our focus has been this particular film and getting the story out, and hopefully there will be a soundtrack as well that will follow.
I mean, even if you can float us here at KCRW a couple of tracks, because we want to be able to play this to promote the movie.
That's right, Chris.
Yeah, you want to, I'm just saying, as a radio host, I'm just saying we're standing by at the ready if you want to share any of that.
Yep.
Anything else you want to leave us with as we close?
I think this is a really fun movie. It's really joyful. It's really fun. The performances are great. There's a lot of story. It's not just a concert film. It really tells the story of the summer of '69 in Harlem, the Black capital of America. And but even with all that's going on in '69 and a lot that has changed and hasn't changed, it's at its root just a joyful, fun movie.
And I would add that I have not seen, a live show, whether it's a music or being in a theater, to watch a movie, in over, 16 months, I believe, maybe longer. And I look forward to getting into a theater, with pristine sound where the picture is going to be huge. And, hopefully people won't tell me to sit down as I'm in the aisle and dancing with others.
I think the only other movie I've been compelled to dance at was Stop Making Sense, but this one may get some people out of the seats too.
Absolutely wonderful. Guys, I am so grateful that you guys pulled it off, and big mad props to Questlove for putting his heart and his hand on this in such a beautiful way. I wish you guys luck with it. I hope everybody sees this movie.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in to KCRW's Behind the Screens. David Dinnerstein, thank you. Thank you, Joseph Patel and Robert Fivolent. And thank you to Searchlight Pictures. You can look out for future KCRW partner screenings and behind the screens events in KCRW's weekly newsletter. Thank you so much for watching.